Welcome back to Narrative Dive, where we are deep diving into the stories dominating our world. We are at an interesting time in the job market, to say the least. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the unemployment rate in July 2025 stands at 4.2%. Many reports say the market has weakened and expect it to weaken further. There are also reports of fake job applicants for remote roles created with AI. There's a current lawsuit against Workday, without diving too deeply into those details, for better disclosure of applicant tracking system practices. What is going on with the job market? There are just floods of complaints on LinkedIn of frustrated job seekers who are saying that their job search is taking a much longer time than it ever has. Fortunately for us, I have Albert Chen with me today, who created Albert's List, the San Francisco Bay Area's most active job search community since 2013. So this community has seen in the last 12 years many ups and downs in the economy, including the COVID-19 pandemic, and has more than 50,000 members who are very active because I am a member of it as well. So Albert, welcome to Narrative Dive. I'm really excited to talk about this timely subject here.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. And there's definitely a lot to talk about.
For sure. So, can you tell us a bit about Albert's List? What sparked the creation of this platform, and how did you really recognize the need for a different approach to job placement? Because the tech industry is the most booming industry in the nation.
Yeah, so I founded Albert's List on March 5th of 2013. And, it was really, in a lot of ways, my own reaction to the job search experience I had coming out of the Great Recession. So I graduated college in 2010. The recession had ended about a year and a half before that. But in reality, job searching at that time was really tough because you still had the financial industry falling apart. You had experienced people who were just trying to get into the market. It was just a tough time for a lot of people. And so I had figured out what I needed to do to get in the professional world, mainly by way of contracting. And after I was able to get a little bit of what I needed, I was like, okay, maybe other people are going through the same. And so I started Albert's Job Listings and Referrals. And I didn't expect it to grow too big, maybe 5,000 people. It's now 10 times that. And the whole idea was let's share job opportunities, let's ask for advice, let's build a community. I invited the recruiters I had on one side and then the job seekers I had on the other side. And the whole thing I think about that was just that, and you see this still today, right? That the job search is a very one-sided conversation where you have job seekers trying to talk to hiring entities. And the thing that Albert's List has really brought in through our Facebook group, which is where mainly people engage, is a lot of recruiters talking to job seekers and just everybody kind of mishmashed in there having a conversation about the job market. Or, what it really, I think, does really well these days is highlights the struggles that people are going through in the market. Whether people have been out for 18 months, they're down to their last bit of savings, they're not sure whether they should negotiate at work right now with a salary bump, all of these kinds of things that are just so and it's very, I would say, it's very topical for all the things going on in the market right now. And so what Albert's List is nowadays, in addition to our Facebook group, is we're also a job search, AI, and side hustle education company. And so what we do is we provide skills in those three areas because our aim is to create indispensable professionals in every single angle in the way of possible. Because we know that, because things have become so expensive and the job market is so fickle and companies will lay off people at a whim, that you need to have your main income. You need to be able to have your side income. And you got to be able to know how to learn AI because AI is coming for all of us. And so we have webinars and workshops on all three topics on a monthly basis. And the whole intent is if you attend any of these kinds of things, that you're going to walk out feeling more prepared to be in this new economic climate that we're in.
That's excellent. I've definitely seen that activity. Just to share with everyone a stat, you've helped over 50,000 professionals and have driven 30 million plus in economic activity.
And it could be more than that at this point.
Yeah,
It's hard to calculate. I'm not really sure anymore, but it's north of that for sure.
that you were able to track. Exactly. So, what does the scale of this impact really teach you about the current state of employment? There's definitely a need, as you said.
Yeah, I think it's number one, the internet and social media have really broken down walls to where people connect and how they connect. And I would say that of it being indicative of the job market, it's definitely not our parents' job market anymore. My mother spent 29 years at IBM. Retired, not graduated, retired with a pension, and, was able to pretty much spend 3 decades at one place. And so that's just not something that is very common anymore, especially if you work in tech and you're rank and file, you're not a leader or manager, and things change like so often that roles evolve and so forth, that companies are always laying people off and hiring new people and so forth. And so the reason what the way that this sort of I think plays into the state of the market is that I think people are looking for options. They're looking for ways to keep their head above water and survive and kind of try to make sense of everything because everything is almost being disrupted all at once. And, we saw how all of that anxiety played out in last year's elections. We see how it plays out in the economic news and socio-political news of today. And I don't think we're going to come to an answer of where this all shakes out anytime soon. And so for the time being, we're just along for the roller coaster ride. And unfortunately, at stake is people's livelihoods, families, family planning, relationships, population rates, birth rates, things like that, that this all downstreams into.
It definitely has many downstreams, absolutely. I mean, from a qualitative side, I've seen the flood of comments on LinkedIn from people saying they've spent 18 months looking for a role and then you look at their LinkedIn and it's like, wow, he's a product manager at three of the biggest tech companies. Why is no one hiring this guy? Are you kidding me? He has every certification. And it seems like there are a lot of highly qualified, talented people out of work still searching after long periods of time. So, and there are also a lot of doomsday headlines.
Yeah.
So, I also see complaints on Albert's list of people filing hundreds of applications. That one sticks out the most. Like, I filed 400 applications, I filed 300 applications. Like, what is going on? I know some of this has to do with the applicant tracking system.
So the applicant tracking system is one angle, and I would say that there's a lot of different things to consider, but the very top of it is this. So when we got out of the pandemic, inflation rose a lot because we spent a lot of money on keeping people afloat. And inflation rising meant that the Federal Reserve of the United States and all these other central banks had to find ways to reduce the cost of money so that it would disincentivize people from going out and spending it. And so they raised interest rates. And the tech industry in particular is very sensitive to interest rates because they've been using low interest rates over the past 12 to 15 years, particularly during the Obama era, to use that money to invest into their startups. And a lot of venture capitalists did this too. And that led to a lot of hiring because when you can borrow money for super cheap and you don't have to pay it back for a really long time, it incentivizes growth really at all angles. That's why you saw everything from really random mobile applications that would get $40 million in funding to flying cars to flying boats and everything in between. And so the moment that all of that stuff, and even down to the things that we consider ubiquitous in our homes now. So, for example, Amazon Alexa or your Google Homes, those were also very sensitive to those changes too, because Google and Amazon borrowed a lot of money to hopefully help and make those technologies grow. And so once interest rates went up, the cost of money went up, and that disincentivized hiring because it made hiring a lot more expensive. And so that was, I would say, the first downward pressure that we've been seeing here for the last 3 years or so. Interest rates have come down a little bit, but they haven't come down enough where we're going to see that kind of hiring blitz or even maybe that rush into buying real estate. The second thing that happened was really the arrival of ChatGPT. And so that happened in December of 2021, and that just blew everybody's minds away because for the first time, you could tell a machine to create copy for you, create images, create videos, cut videos like this podcast, and so forth and beyond. And so a little bit of a corollary to that is that labor is the most expensive thing that is on a company's expenses. And so for a lot of people, they don't like to hire because it just takes away from their bottom line. And so AI, as a result, gives a lot of companies this excuse to say, oh, well, I'll just replace these five people that I had with an AI chatbot or an AI agent. And so that's the second piece. And that third piece is also related to AI, which is just basically the rush into AI. And so a lot of companies, especially the big ones like your Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, Google, all want to be first in line to win this AI war. And so they laid off a bunch of people because they wanted to take all of that money and invest it into AI. And so as a result, even though these companies still make lots of money, and we've seen quarterly earnings over the last couple of weeks be very positive, they're all putting their ducks into that. And so as a result, you have a lot of people who worked in other industries who are now out on the market, companies that were attached to these industries also now out on the market. And so you have a really, really competitive market, one that we really haven't seen this competitive in about 15 years since the Great Recession. And so it's hard for anyone really to find a job right now unless you work in one of these impacted industries, like in analytics or AI or cryptocurrency, all things that are really hot in this present time. And so, yeah, you have really great qualified people who are out of work, who send in hundreds and hundreds of applications who aren't getting jobs, partially because the jobs aren't there, partially because it's so competitive, and then partially because individual job seekers are sometimes not very great at describing themselves and positioning themselves in the market. So it's a little bit of things that are in people's control and a little bit of things that are out of people's control.
That's a that is a really great overview of so many factors. And yes, I've explained that to people as well, that there are many factors at play here. They in many cases they were blaming it on AI, but AI has disrupted how recruiters recruit. It's also caused a flood of fake applications. There's so many levels in which AI has changed this process. One of the complaints I'm seeing from recruiters is the watered down ChatGPT cover letter where the person clearly just AI generated a cover letter and sent it in. And then, so when someone says, I've applied to over 400 jobs, what does that mean? Like, what is it, spray and
I always
pray?
wonder, application 273, did it not occur? Maybe you should ask for a referral or
Yeah, yeah.
go to a networking event, maybe do something differently.
Yes, exactly. And that's what, not that I'm blaming anyone who's doing that, but there's that phrase that's circulating LinkedIn, spray and pray, and that's where
Right.
candidates are just sort of sending out mass resumes, apply, apply, and then saying, "Oh, I'm not getting any traction." And then recruiters are saying, "Well, we're getting these resumes and they're clearly AI generated and the cover letter is clearly AI generated." So there was one recruiter who was saying on LinkedIn, "I reject any candidate with an generated cover letter because I have so many applicants." So
Mhm.
if your cover letter sounds the same and they know as the next person's that chat gpt generated, I think you're not original and I just reject you automatically.
The other thing is the glut of applications also comes from, I would say, the ubiquity of the internet these days. So not only do you have, say, a large multinational company fielding applications from US-based candidates, you also have applications coming in from abroad. Even though, maybe somebody in the heart of Africa or Southeast Asia would never qualify to come to the United States to work because they can't get a visa or they simply don't have the qualifications. You have people who are just submitting resumes because they can submit a resume. If you can access LinkedIn anywhere in the world, you can submit your resume from anywhere in the world. And so there are people out there who have really taken the whole idea of if you never try, then you will never know to heart, and they will literally apply for anything, thinking and hoping that they might actually get a reply for something.
And there's also a disconnect between job postings and actual hiring, and there's I wanted to get into that a bit because we should take that to the ATS systems. ATS is nothing new, right? They have been around since around 2000. You graduated in 2010. I graduated in 2007. I know, before the 2010s. Can you believe it? But ATS systems existed all the way back then, which is almost 20 years ago now. So they're nothing new.
And they've morphed into this thing where it's an advanced filtration system where if you don't say the right password, then you automatically get locked out. So yeah, I mean, and the ATS system is a lot of like being able to use the right keywords, having your resume match what they're looking for, and I think that combined with the whole fake jobs and jobs that aren't actually open, it really does create a lot of like frustration and I think it goes back to something that we know as networkers that has always worked, which is that something like 92% of job openings are filled through personal connection. And a lot of the time, it's also because these jobs are out there, they're being filled because somebody was hired internally and they made an internal transfer. And so, for a lot of people who are looking for a job and they see a job opening on a website, it's likely that somebody internally is already interviewing for it. It's likely that it's already been filled, and they're just very late to the game. And so, while there is this need to apply blindly to these places, on the other side, it's also important that people find ways around the applicant tracking system where they speak to a human first and then apply, or they find a way around completely where they meet the right person that can help them and then move forward in the application process.
Exactly. And I know there is a lawsuit towards Workday right now where the candidate had mentioned that he applied to over 100 jobs. I think it was over 100. And he said that, I was perfectly qualified for these roles. I met every qualification. I customized my resume and I would get rejection emails at 2 o'clock in the morning, which clearly told me that something was off. And what I've been told that if your resume isn't the right format, the ATS will automatically reject you, whether you're a qualified candidate or not. Very sensitive thing. So now you're pairing that with the integration of AI.
Yep.
Paired with the integration of AI, on the recruiting pipeline back end, what's that? What has that done? How has this changed?
Yeah, and the whole Workday lawsuit also centers around ageism as well. And this is a uniquely like resume question because it gets into, right, do you put your graduation year? And the advice that we usually give is if you're more than 10 years out of school, you leave your graduation year off. And I think the other thing is just you have to also look like you are current in your skills and your capabilities. And unfortunately, all these biases exist within hiring. And they've always existed to some way, but the unfortunate thing is that technology is accelerating it. And I have a belief that AI is going to make it worse because when it comes to AI, it's all about the data that you use for anything that you have in there. And so, whereas before maybe you could have a human look at things, and AI helps you do it faster. And so, if your hiring strategies are mediocre, AI will just accelerate that mediocrity. And so, I think with AI coming more into the job search process, it's really going to muddle and frustrate job seekers even more, right? Like in addition to the ATS system, you also now have employers who want you to interview with AI first before you talk to people.
I've seen that. Yeah.
You also have situations where you, as the applicant, are doing a video presentation to some AI and that video gets sent off to somebody before you even get to interview with somebody. And so I think that's a plague of companies who have fewer people doing more work, trying to find ways to cut corners, to see how they can still hire and grow without having to do all the traditional things that everybody's used to when it comes to hiring.
Definitely. And do you have an idea of a percentage of how many qualified candidates are being filtered out before human eyes ever see their application? Is there a
No,
stat?
but I think it's logical to say that the more you rely on a machine to help you get through a hiring process, the lower your odds are of getting through that hiring process because you're going to be getting filtered through business rules and logic from that business that you will never know about. And they may just completely disqualify you because you forgot to put a comma or a period somewhere. And like even if you submit a PDF versus a Word document or if you have your experience in a Word table, those things can also be disqualifying too. And so it's all these little tiny details that are really like small annoyances that become gigantic annoyances in this whole job search process that we see today. And it makes you wonder whether companies are actually looking to hire or whether they're looking to just collect a lot of data in the attempts of something later on. And I've interviewed in my life before where once the interview process is over and they've rejected me, they add me to their marketing email list. And some
I
of
have
these
too.
companies are interesting
Yeah,
and I'll stay on and I'll read the occasional email, but it feels really hollow. So like it's like, okay, yeah, you rejected me and now you want to show off to me what it is that you're doing and somehow I'll feel good about reading this. Okay.
exactly. I can't wait.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I
So
think it's safe to say this is an interesting conclusion, and I'm seeing this statement more and more. We've created all these new AI systems for hiring that are supposed to have made the process easier, more smooth, and what it's coming down to in the end is, and you said this is a great quote, any process where you're relying on the machine to get through the door is probably not working in your favor as much as person to person interaction. What I'm seeing coming out of this is this renewal of people wanting to meaningfully network. Like, I created this podcast, for example, as a way to meaningfully network with
Mhm.
people who are already in my network, but with interesting people who are doing interesting things in other networks. Through this, I'm seeing emerge this renewed desire for solid person to person contact when, ironically, the machine was supposed to make everything easier. It's not.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I've noticed about working in tech over the last 15 years is that there's a mismatch between the intended value proposition and the intended outcome, right? So, like, Facebook was supposed to connect us all, and instead we're arguing with our third uncle about the politics of this country.
Exactly.
Cell phones were supposed to allow us to connect to data and information more quickly, and then we go out to dinner with our friends, and that's all we're looking at. And then there's, AI, right, which is supposed to make us more efficient. It's supposed to uh, connect us to more ideas and allow us to be faster so that we can go back to spending time cooking and doing all that stuff. And now we have robots that will cook for you. And so I think the intent and the impact are always really really different and can be very flawed. And I think it's with us the same thing within hiring is that we wanted to filter out people much easier and we wanted to hire people faster. But what we really did was we gave people more roadblocks so that they would stay unemployed somehow, even if the company didn't mean it, and then create all this frustration and anger that we see today.
Yeah, it's literally like vitriol at this point. Like, people are
Yeah,
just
yeah.
ready to come for the AI companies. It's pretty wild.
Then
So
you
are
have
there
this taboo that you can't complain about this either, because if you complain about companies, then all of a sudden you're unhireable. And it's like, how do you toe the balance between that when there's genuine inequities that exist within the system and you can fix these equities, but you won't because maybe the inequity is the point.
exactly? Yes, I know your list covers a lot of the Bay Area tech industry, but are there specific industries or company sizes where these systems are causing more damage than other companies? I know in tech they probably are.
Think of the bigger the company, so your Fortune 500s, probably the harder it will be to reach somebody. Your smaller startups, you could probably go to a number of mixers or events in the Bay Area and find those founders directly. But at a bigger company where there's a lot more systems and a lot more people managing these things, sometimes you're just submitting resumes in the black holes and who knows what's on the other side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, speaking of all of this movement, what psychological patterns are you seeing in job seekers? Because I've seen on Albert's list when I've looked at the forum, some people are really venting on there.
Yeah.
Who are, yeah. What psychological patterns are you seeing?
I think it's loss of confidence. I think you see a loss of personal value. And I think, especially in Western societies where, when we go to a networking event, the first question we ask people is, what do you do? We very much hinge the value of people onto the work that they do and just who they are. Status is incredibly important, right? I mean, you've traveled the world and you tell people you work in tech. All of a sudden it elevates you into some other like level. Whereas if you tell people that you're a teacher or that you mop floors for a living, even though those are very, very noble pursuits, you don't get that level of, I think, respect either. And it's a very white collar thing that I think we've seen over the last 15 years where it's like, oh, you have a degree and that makes you all the more credible and everything. And I also think that, the psychological impact of a job search that isn't going the way of people is also um, really is really impactful for one's physical well-being too. So one stat that I was looking at earlier this year, and that I've been really marinating on over the last 3 years, is the stat that came from an NIH study from 2021 that said that for every 1% increase in global unemployment, you also get a 1% increase in male suicide. You also have data that showed that, even going back into the early 20 teens, for example, in Greece, when they were going through their credit and debt crisis, between 2007 and 2013, you saw their suicide rates go up 60%. And so there's very much this tie into that. And so when I think about, what's happened with Doge and what's happened with these continued tech layoffs that we see almost on a daily, weekly basis right now, I know that companies see people as numbers and they see them as just lines on a spreadsheet. But the real downward visceral impact of all of this and it is very real because it goes into our communities. People delay families, they delay marriages, delay crucial milestones. And when I see people celebrating government layoffs because they're seeing the loss of government jobs because they think things will become more efficient, while not thinking about the people that are leaving these jobs and having to go find something else, and who knows how long it'll take them to find that something else, it very much troubles me because it's like, okay, sure, we're gonna move people away and there's a business strategy behind this, but the sociological impact that results in it with less confidence, mental health issues, suicide, families falling apart, and knowing that, people in this country in the United States live paycheck to paycheck, like there's got to be something that has to happen in order to help people land safely. And, all the while we're also trying to dismantle social safety nets too. And so it's like, what is our goal at the end of all this? And I know that all sounds really political, but I think that people at work and the state of a country and politics are also very intertwined.
And this is all converging at once, this massive AI technological race with dismantling politics, with a change in markets consistently. Agreed, it is a messy time, and it is predicted by many experts that it will be even messier for a while until it straightens itself out or gets
Yeah.
or smooths into something better. I
Because right now
do.
you see all this data that's like, oh, okay, by 2027, AI will do everything, or by 2030, we'll have reached some kind of artificial general intelligence. And we talk about it and we throw it around philosophically, like it'll come someday, and it may come someday, but what are we practically going to do about it? Because AI to me also is a transfer of wealth to the top, where the owners of capital will hold all these AI tools and they'll hold all the energy to allow the AI to run. And there will be the operators of AI who are going to work at that whim. And then there are the people who are going to be impacted by AI who have nowhere to go because AI now does everything. And are we okay with that as a society?
And there is that ripple effect is causing people to feel all the more hopeless with all the changes. So let's pivot towards some solutions. There have to be some practical workarounds and strategies to getting people hired, especially your members. Person to person interaction is key, I'm hearing, as the number one.
I think being prepared and putting yourself out there are really important. So we had a really great success story over the last couple of weeks on Albert's List. We had an individual who had been out of work since February, and she came to us to do a mock interview and ended up getting an offer from that company that she interviewed, which was TikTok this week. And so we do mock interviews. We try and give these opportunities at, all sorts of pricing points for people, and putting yourself out there and really giving yourself that chance to prepare so you could show up in the best way possible is, I think, one of the most important things. Another success story that I've had from a friend I didn't help, but somebody who was incredibly qualified. He's a software engineer, and he took 2 weeks off from work and applied to a bunch of different places like crazy, and was actually able to get an offer in 2 weeks. And so I think the whole 400 applications thing is definitely a mindset that you have to take into your job search, but you have to be targeted about it. You have to be focused and you have to know exactly why you're doing it. If you're a marketer applying for accounting jobs, you really have to be able to sell yourself or sell the person hiring you on why exactly you're the best fit for that role. I think the other thing, personal connections. So the person that I mentioned who got a job in 2 weeks was heavily reliant on referrals. He had built a really great reputation in his industry of work over the last couple of years. And when he notified people that he was on the market, they went to bat for him. And so if you find your tribe, the people who are willing to go and bat for you, you're going to see that work out heavily in your favor because people will definitely hire other people versus something that maybe a robot spit out. And then I think that the last one is really to have skills that are super in demand right now. So right now is not the time necessarily to get into white collar, but if you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics jobs reports over the last 15 years, the one bright spot that has been growing and will probably grow for the next 20 years is healthcare. So if changing a bedpan is compelling to you, if filling out healthcare paperwork is interesting to you, or just taking care of sick people is a talent that you have, then healthcare is something that you can bank your career on at least until I would say 2042, because that's when all baby boomers will have turned 80 and you'll have probably a decline in healthcare after that. But between now and then, you can make a good career off of it because those are things that are in demand. Other areas that I think I've seen on the Bureau of Labor Statistics jobs report that do really well, at least these days, tend to be your service jobs and your hospitality jobs. And those tend to be more seasonal. So I would say that when it comes down to all of it at the end of the day, we should all be looking to work in healthcare, especially if you haven't been finding much success. And then I would say the other strategy around that may be more temporary until maybe we get out of whatever this might be, is that you really have to be flexible to think about the opportunities that are available to you now. Schools are facing a shortage in teachers and substitutes. Looking for contract jobs is always a way to go, and that's how I started my career. You might have to rebuild your career 6 to 9 months at a time. And the other thing is we now live in a world where the digital world provides a lot of different opportunities to do stuff, whether it's starting some kind of channel on TikTok or YouTube, promoting something or showing something that you do. You have more ways than ever to showcase your talents. And, while that's a completely different podcast, those are opportunities that are out there that I think can provide people that way out so that in case they need that plan B, plan C, it is there for them.
As someone who's also done contracts, contracts can be a really excellent opportunity to work on a fascinating project and be hyper focused on a project that rather than being an employee working on the same sort of job day to day, you're actually very deep in something new and interesting that you can evolve your skills on, which I've done before myself, and I would recommend that to anybody. So don't look away from contracts. Yes, you don't get the stock options and a lot of the other perks with those, but in the meantime, they can lead you to something really great.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we all can't work at NVIDIA.
So looking ahead, where do you see all of this converging? We've kind of touched on that a little bit, but like I would say in the next 10 to 15 years, could you give us a picture?
Yeah. I mean, looking out like 2 to 3 years is tough right now because you have no idea where AI will go, what kind of sentiency that it will acquire, and how it'll look at that. But I would say that we're heading into a very interesting 2026 because what we're seeing is, I think, a return to potential inflation with lower interest rates, with potentially a stagnant economy due to layoffs and tariffs and things like that. And so all of that has the makings of potential stagflation, which means that we're probably going to be on our way to a lot more frustrating times over the next couple of years. I think that I think in the ideal world, depending on whether if you're a business owner, that AI is going to be that permanent shift where you have people relying on agents and bots to help you get things done. And that's why you're seeing a lot of people move into the trades right now. That's an area that's a lot of interest for a lot of people because it has that shield from AI for some time. Now, the other thing that I think we have to think about is how many jobs AI creates or destroys. Right
Exactly.
now, it's a lot of numbers right now that are people throwing out pie in the sky data saying, oh, yeah, it'll be creative discretion and we'll create more jobs and it'll destroy blah, blah, blah. And I think the most important thing that I've probably heard about AI comes from a friend of mine who really kind of put it out simply this way is that we've come from an economic world where technology, for the most part, has been disruptive to one singular aspect. So the printing press disrupted how people publish newspapers. The tractor disrupted how people farm their crops. The computer, in its early days, disrupted how multimedia specialists built newsletters and created media. AI, on the other hand, is the aggregation of all of these things into large language models, small language models, and the whole idea now is that AI will impact everything that has ever been created. So even if you're a plumber or a carpenter or somebody who writes books for a living or creates art, there is an AI use case that will be ubiquitous for whatever it is that is out there. And the demand for that kind of thing will depend on the acceptability of slop that people will allow for in this world. And so we're heading into a world where when we get to a point where AI can possibly do a little bit of everything, will it allow for us to leave anything for humans to do? And so that will eventually lead us down the road into conversations like universal basic income and possibly, taxing companies that use lots of AI and whether you tax companies for every piece of AI that they lose, that they get rid of and so forth. And so that'll be a really interesting shift. And and of course, AI as a whole, it's hard to say like in the next 5 years, but the success of AI as a whole is also going to depend on energy. We reopened 3 Mile Island. We're opening new nuclear plants. We're taking water away from everyday neighborhoods and pumping them into data centers. And so are people going to tolerate that? Or are people going to tolerate the energy usage? And so you may end up, right? So how this ends up usually in the tech world is you'll hear all these pie in the sky interest and predictions. We've heard this before, right? How the internet would be this, or how social media would be that, or how cloud computing would be this. And they always aim for the moon and they land somewhere in the stars. Because if you think about it, and I use this example all the time with people now, is that we all remember when Uber and Lyft first came on the market. You
I
could get
do.
across San Francisco for $5. It was wonderful. And you didn't think about it too hard because you didn't realize that Sequoia Capital and Andreessen Horowitz were subsidizing that on the back end with their venture capital funding rounds. And it wasn't until that Lyft and Uber went public that the cost of a taxi from a Lyft and an Uber was the same as a yellow cab. And that the value proposition of a Lyft and an Uber at that juncture was just like, well, I can hail one with an app and the other one I just kind of have to wave my hands. And so the thing that I always remind people of with AI and with Lyft and Uber is that a lot of it is being subsidized right now. There will be a day when it is no longer subsidized. And the day that is no longer subsidized, ChatGPT Plus might go from $20 to $60 a month. And will people be willing to pay $60 a month? Who knows? But the value proposition of it will certainly change because a certain amount of people will be able to afford it and want to use it. And so Lyft and Uber were things that were aiming for the moon and they ultimately landed in the stars. And I think AI will eventually go that route too, but who knows what the consequences of that will truly be.
Absolutely. It's interesting that you bring this up because I was having a conversation. Actually, I have another guest who's coming on who's an expert in AI agents, and we were talking about how the product manager role before Web 2 was not really a role. I mean, in some cases it was, but after the Web 2 platform era, that type of a job really exploded and there became, thousands of product manager, not product managers, not project, well, project managers too, which always existed as well. But the Web 2 era disrupted many things and, yes, did take away some jobs, arguably, but it did create other jobs. The other point I wanted to illustrate for what you were mentioning about the cost of services and the affordability, I've seen complaints as well that some companies are very much taking advantage of job seekers, charging buku money for LinkedIn profile refreshes and tapping into that. And I remember seeing several comments like, what do you expect unemployed people with, 2 to 3 kids and a mortgage to pay for these services? You're asking for $4,000 for a LinkedIn refresh campaign. I mean, I would love to do it and my intent is there, but it's inaccessible to me. And
Yeah,
then there's also the cost of LinkedIn Premium, which does have benefits, but it also is
gone up a lot too.
it's gone up a lot in the last even 5 years. I think it's gone up, what, $10 a month or something. I don't quote me on that. But I've noticed that the cost has risen quite a bit. And ideally, who would be one of your best customers for LinkedIn Premium would be a job seeker.
Hmm.
So, how do you balance the market capitalizing on people's need and in some cases desperation with the need of these companies to also survive?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that everything has gotten more expensive and everything seems to rise together. And that's one thing that I think I pride Albert's List on, which is accessibility. We do our 6-week job search boot camps for just a shade under $300. And most of our workshops are between 60 to 120. Because, my whole entire goal is, you are probably jobless, but you also need something to build your skills. And if we deny you the ability to build those things, because you can only use ChatGPT free for so long until you can't, then we're going to end up with a world of people who want to do what they want to do, but can't have the resource or entryway to do it. And so at that point, you can't accuse people of not trying when it's there. And so when people say and use words like, oh, you have to invest in yourself, I think that also comes with a heavy caveat because it's like, okay, sure, somebody spending $50 is really noble, but are they really going to get what they think they're going to get out of $4,000? And my answer is that's really an overpay and probably not.
Yeah, there was a, recruiter. I don't remember her name. She has red hair. She's a social media influencer. But
Mhm.
she has a actual recruiting company, and she'd posted a reel that was very much like LinkedIn is a profit powerhouse. You don't need to pay $4,000 for someone refreshing your LinkedIn page. It's interesting how the personal brand revolution on LinkedIn has become exactly that. You go to and my profile is even now that, where you go to someone's profile, they've got a banner, they've got branding, they've got buy my book, do this, watch my speaker reel. They've become a commodity on LinkedIn.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, if you're a job seeker, your skills are the commodity that you're selling to people. And in some ways, it's helped me learn about people more as somebody who runs a podcast and wants to find guest experts. If I go to your LinkedIn page and it's very clear what value you bring and what you're an expert in, super easy for me to invite you on. But when I go to someone's LinkedIn and it's scattered, there's too much media on there, but it's not really driving me in any direction, then it takes work for me to go through their profile. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but we are definitely becoming products.
Yeah, and I think it was Reid Hoffman who wrote The Startup of You back in the day, who kind of predicted all this that we would all commoditize ourselves. And I think to some effect you do have to do it. And as somebody who's read a lot of resumes from a lot of members of my community, I would say the first takeaway that I have from that is that a lot of people sell themselves short. And so we do need to have people do a better job of explaining their value proposition and what they do. Because in a ways, right, AI is turning all of us into solo entrepreneurs in terms of all the things that we do. I run Albert's List solo and I use ChatGPT along with a couple of other tools on a regular basis to help me get faster with the work that I do. And so we all have to kind of embrace what that future looks like. You don't necessarily need to be the entrepreneur salesman with a newsletter and selling offers that expire at midnight, but you do need to be somebody who knows what it is that you stand for and what it is that you're capable of doing, because like you said, right, you have the same challenge that hiring managers have, that you go to somebody's LinkedIn and you want them to see the value proposition immediately. In the job world, that's 6 seconds or less with your resume. If I can't tell what it is that you do in under 10 seconds, your resume is going in the no pile. And so similarly, if you, with your podcast, if you can't tell what somebody does in maybe 30 seconds or less, then you're moving on to the next guest. And so a lot of job seekers are victims of this 6 seconds because their resume is a wall of text that nobody knows what they do, or they've done so many things in their life and they're a Jack or Jane of all trades and they've got 15 different jobs and 15 different job titles and they haven't bothered to unify it all. It is not up to you, me, or another hiring manager or a guest booker for a podcast to determine those things. It is up to the person who wants that attention to get to that point. And so that's also, I guess, yeah, another way for the solution. If you're a job seeker, your way out of your purgatory is to make sure that people know what you do. So if you are working in tech and you're a product manager, go find somebody who doesn't work in tech, show them your resume, and take the resume away after 10 seconds and ask them to read back to you what it is that you do.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I've done
That's
this. So my girlfriend works for a congressman. Couldn't tell you the difference between a cloud in the sky and cloud computing. And I've put resumes from tech people in front of her, and I'm like, can you tell what this person does? And she'll look at it and she'll give me the most confused eyes, and she's like, not a clue. And that's my clue that, yeah, if you haven't explained it well enough that, your grandma, your fourth grader, your uncle, your aunt who doesn't have a clue what you do, if they can't even tell, then you need to revamp the way you describe yourself completely.
that's a really good point. That is a great method of giving somebody who's outside your industry your resume to reiterate that and having them tell what you do in was 6 seconds, you said, was the average time. Yeah.
6 seconds is usually, maybe you give somebody 4 extra seconds. I don't know how much of a new thing you find with that, but yeah, I mean, you just have to explain yourself well enough because most of us are not rocket scientists and most of us are not doing something that's so complex that you shouldn't be able to explain it. And I have seen a rocket scientist resume, and those resumes happen to be so niche that if you do go and take your resume to somebody who's hiring rocket scientists, chances are you're already in a very exclusive club.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, it's probably a small, having worked recently in the aerospace industry. Yes,
Yeah.
that's a small pool for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So that said, with that tactic as well, for someone who's listening, who's frustrated and needs some guidance, what are the top three things that they should start doing differently with their job search tomorrow?
So, number one is to do a filtered LinkedIn search of first and second degree connections on people who are doing what it is that you want to do today. And even before you get into the referral process, have conversations, do informational interviews, and ask for advice. Figure out what it is that the market that you want to enter into is looking for right now and offer up your insights and treat this reach out like you were doing a marketing campaign. So, you can use AI for this, but make it sound like you and look for people who you think can be helped and use your warm connections. So people that you used to work with, people that you went to school with, friends of friends, things like that. And so that's usually the best way to go in because you come in pre-vetted, you have something to relate to. You could always talk about your college days, your high school days. Those things that people love to talk about all the time. So that would be tip number one. Tip number two is to learn how to use AI in your career and find ways to apply it into the work that you do or the work that you want to do. Whether it's learning how to type in ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, etc., or use like a separate like AI video editing tool. All of these things are going to be important to your career at some point. And so being skilled in those, maybe building a side hustle with it, are all going to be important pieces. And then number three is the one that I mentioned, which was being flexible in terms of how you find that next opportunity. We are definitely in an economy where opportunities are found in very unlikely places. And in times of economic uncertainty, it's also the time where you build the foundation to really truly soar when the economy gets better, right? So like Uber, Lyft, Pinterest, were all founded during the Great Recession. And they are the stalwarts that they are today. And so whether it's looking to go work in healthcare because healthcare needs jobs, or working in education and making that industry switch or starting that side hustle, you have to be open to the possibilities. The market is switching and changing faster than ever. And so, as much as we all want to be somewhere for the next 30 years, it's incredibly difficult to find that. But the best way to be doing something for the next 30 years that makes you indispensable is betting on yourself.
That's excellent advice. And so, any final thoughts for job seekers? or employers listening today?
Yeah, so for job seekers, I would say it's always going to be control what you can do in your own locus of control. The market is going to be what the market is, and things are going to be crazy and uncertain probably for a while. And frankly, the way I think about it, if you go back 50, 60, 70 years, I think it's always been this way. It just seems a lot worse now because there's a TikTok every other scroll that's going to tell you that the world is doomed. So maybe just accept that the world is what it is and that you can only do the things that you can do and you can't change other people. And so focus on the skills that you need, meet the people that you're going to meet, be open to the opportunities of networking with others, and understand your value proposition. Leverage that 10-second rule. Because even while companies aren't hiring right now, or aren't hiring at the high volume that they are, companies have real challenges right now.
Well, Albert, I really, really appreciate you coming on and shedding some interesting conversation on this topic. Oh, you're